So I'm walking down the street, taking it easy, minding my own business, snapping my fingers to the rhythm of the voices in my head, when suddenly I'm snapped out of this state of serenity because I notice someone is tearing through traffic on foot and they're doing it in my direction. And I start freaking out. And just as I've registered that this person has run up to me and started screaming, I also realize, oh my god, it's Ryan Gosling. And Ryan Gosling is screaming in my face, oh my god, you're BKC. I am such a huge fan. I donate to the Patreon you have in the description of all of your videos, and I cannot wait for the trailer for your movie to come out so I can give you all my life savings so you can make the greatest movie of the 21st century. Thus far, until you make your second movie, in which case you'll top it. Yeah, while all this was happening, I was like, oh my god, I'm so grateful for this. But there's got to be a catch. And right then, Ryan Gosling said, but there's a catch. And I was like, sure, well, what is it? And he was like, I need you to do something for me. I need you to give me underrated sets for DPP OU because I got a tournament game coming up. And, I need the good stuff. I need the edge. And I was more than willing to give him the good stuff. And I figured, while I'm at it, I may as well give you kind viewers the good stuff as well. So all this stuff is not just the product of my mind, but it's been tested. It's had some good results. And it's not just the 24 sets you see on the screen. There's some other mentions as well. Just because I have this thing where I hate having a definitive version of a team or even a set. Sets less so, but definitely in context of a team, because those sets you might have to tweak based on the needs of your team, for example. Like even just the EVs. On some teams, a Pokemon won't need to be a certain speed number, and on others, then it will. So, for example, the first two sets are just two variations on the same Jirachi idea, but they make enough of a difference where I wanted to include them. Yeah, I also will be including some replays of these in action. Not the entire replays, just so you can see what happens. So there's a little bit of visual stimulation to this, but you'll mostly be looking at the sets and listening to my voice. I know that's the main appeal. So, yeah, we're starting off with the good old Superachi. Now, Superachi kind of took a tumble in terms of popularity. Actually, this is a video all to itself, because before, dealing with Ironhead Jirachi was not like the automatic pain that it is now, because there was a very real possibility that it would use Calm Mind. And then that kind of fell out of favor, especially because physical Jirachi with Fire Punch was so good at dealing with Calm Mind Jirachi. Or, Calm Mind variants of Calm Mind Jirachi that were used before, i.e. leftovers. But that's where my new experiments came in. I mean, this is not the most novel thing. A lot of the sets here, or a couple of the sets here, are full-on standard, but standard sets kind of fall out of favor, and then in new contexts of later developments in the metagame become more underrated. And that's why I wanted to highlight them, because being underrated or creative does not mean inventing something that has never been seen before. I could invent a new Jirachi set no one's ever seen before right now, and it would be terrible, but hey, it would be unexpected in your next tournament game. Too bad it wouldn't help you win. But and if it's not just a standard set, then it's little tweaks on the standard sets. Like, if you want to help make Superachi more threatening, then you don't, I don't know what you would do. You just throw Lumberry on it. That's the main idea. Well, one of the main ideas, because you will notice this Superachi is also modest, and I think that's really important, because it really scrapes for all the power it can get. And obviously you can run Timid Lum Superachi as well. I've done that, and it's completely fine. I mean, it depends on the team. But if your preference for playstyle / your team / whatever / how you woke up that morning says, hey, I like modest, I think it's really good. Especially when you're trying to power through a status-happy Jirachi with HP Grounds, or HP Fire, but more on that in a second, that are as strong as possible. So, the Lumberry is useful in all sorts of situations, though. It's not just for helping your Superachi sweep, but it's also good for helping you switch into Breloom Spore mainly in the mid game. Because if you're playing a fast-paced offense game, you don't need to counter it, forever, quote unquote. And just being able to completely reverse the momentum on it like that is really good. But yeah, it's great in all sorts of situations. You completely ruin Scarf Magnezone trying to T-Wave you. You can do things like switch into a Gengar Will-O-Wisp. So all sorts of good stuff. So yeah, just standard Super Rachi, but with Lumberry is really good. Now, the main thing, another enemy Super Rachi has in the current metagame, besides just... the Modest Nature is also really helpful for helping you threaten Clefable as much as you can. And in general, it's also really good for really plowing through Heatrans and Tyranitar especially if you got Grass Knot. Which is, of course, the coverage itself, like Psychic T-Ball, HP Ground, great for a lot of teams, but you can also run Thunderbolt Well, I like having a super effective hidden power in this status-happy Rachi age. So that, I wouldn't go with that. I would always go with HP Ground or Fire. But you can run the old classic coverage of Psychic Grass Knot HP Fire. Now, that other enemy I was mentioning, that is Latias, and defensive Latias is a pain, but it's also very easy to lure Latias in and take it out, whether that's with an Explosion Heatran or by pursuing it with Tar or like a Toxic Zapdos or something. There are a million options, so it really depends. But if you are going to run a Calm Mind or a Super Rachi, because Super Rachi does mean offensive Calm Mind, if you are going to run Super Rachi walled by Latias, you do need a plan for it. Although, funnily enough, it's only really defensive Latias that can be a pain, and even then, I mean, it depends on the Latias set. I've had some games where the Super Rachi would wind up paralyzed against like a standard Ice Beam Reflect T-Wave Latias, and it just actually keeps boosting up and powering through eventually, so... Yeah, Jirachi is really good. Super Rachi is wonderful. It's a great late-game Pokemon. It blasts through a lot. It's very hard to... It's great against offensive pokes. It's great against defensive pokes. Wonderful to have. So you can run also Psychic T-Ball, HP Ground, or Psychic Grass Knot, HP Fire. Also really good. Smacking Swampert immediately is wonderful. Hippowdon, of course. And the bigger hit against Tyranitar is big as well. You got to deal with Heatran, but hey, there's lots of ways to deal with Heatran. Provoke it into exploding with your Latias and switch to a Ghost or something. There's all sorts of things. But this is the more creative version of a Super Rachi. Now, Draco Meteor Calm Mind Jirachi has been used before, but it's mostly been used on Sub Calm Mind, to my recollection. Or no, that's not true. I'm sorry. August used it on a Super Rachi before, but I think his coverage was Psychic Draco HP Ground. Yeah, so Sub Calm Mind was popular because it turns the tables against Latias. That whole thing about, if you're running Super Rachi walled by Latias, well, with this, then you lure in and destroy Latias. And it's good on Sub Calm Mind for that reason. But it's also good on Super Rachi. August used it, and I think Jirachi, like the user Jirachi, Jirachee. So he used it as well, but I think their coverage was Psychic Draco HP Ground, which is fine, but being walled by Skarmory and Bronzong is not to my liking. And also, it seems like everyone suddenly thinks Scizor is the best thing ever. And also, Celebi has become popular. So, Draco Meteor over... so I like Psychic Draco HP Fire. I think it's good coverage because Psychic HP Fire is already great coverage. And then you're really rounding it out with that last slot. And Draco Meteor does... I mean, hitting Latias is a big deal. I personally, and I might make a video on this, think that Latias is the best Pokemon in DPP at this time. And being able to hit it is really big. Obviously, you have all sorts of other benefits. Like, you have a Calm Mind Jirachi that is able to immediately threaten a KO on Dragonite. That, you can't fit, HP Ice on Calm Mind Jirachi most of the time. So, that is a very... You know what I'm getting at, but I just tried to say 16 phrases at once in my head, so I mixed them up and said nothing. But it gives you flexibility that you usually don't get in a Calm Mind Jirachi slot against offense. You can instantly threaten something like a mixed Flygon as well, of course. And the nice thing about Draco Meteor is that it gives you a second move that has a lot of power. It's actually stronger than Psychic, but it is. Yeah, it is, because 90, half of 90 is 45, so 90 plus 45 is 135. So Draco Meteor actually has a 5 base power jump on it. But even if it was the same power, it's the fact that you have another move that has such strong base power for neutral hits. Because sometimes Calm Mind and Mixed Jirachi as well, they have the problems of not having strong neutral moves, and they really rely on super effective coverage. And with Draco Meteor, then you kind of make up for the lack of super effective coverage with raw power, and that's really nice. Now, you could theoretically do something like this with Flash Cannon as well. I thought about that because it hits Latias as well, hits it very nicely, and it also smacks T-Tar. You could do that. But I really like the extra power of Draco Meteor in all sorts of situations, especially because Flash Cannon is 80 base power, if I'm not mistaken. In Gen 4, at least. I think they buffed it. Yep, it's 80. So you have that 20 base power boost over Flash Cannon. That's significant. And, I mean, having 2 stabs is nice, but Flash Cannon doesn't have as good neutral coverage. And the extra power is just so big, and the immediacy of the Latias factor is absolutely huge. So, and all sorts of other situations, like suddenly you have that extra base power smack on something like Zapdos or Gyarados that you wouldn't have otherwise, or like Gliscor. So yeah, I really like Draco Meteor, and here's the first replay example. This is not really a traditional example of how it might look like, but it's a great example of how Jirachi can sort of like force these wins in all sorts of situations. Let me adjust my dimensions there. So the premise, the whole idea of this game is that my Jirachi is lower on power points. It's got only a couple Psychics left and HP Fires, and it's hitting Clefable really hard, and it gets that 20% special defense drop. It's been using a lot of Psychics, and I think that was the first one. So it's just barely not 2-killing that Spit F Hippo, but it's coming really close. Imagine if I had maintained Rocks. So he's switching back and forth. Oh, yeah. So he's stalling out my Psychics pretty much. So I gotta get that Calm Mind, but I'm only going to have 3 Psychics to burst through this Clef and this Hippo. So. But he wants to Encore. That's the idea. There you go. So Encore, I have 1 Psychic left. So he's going to go to Hippo, sacrifice it, and then without Psychic, because he knows it's HP Fire. So once that's Grass Knot and HP Fire is his only moves, then Clef will be able to beat it. I mean, more likely than not. So that's his general idea. All right. So, but the Encore wears off because, I'm out of Psychic, so I can't be Encored into it anymore. And then I HP Fire, finish it off, and Clef comes in and gets Draco Meteored. And it's one of my favorite turns ever. It's so great. So, yeah, Draco Meteor, just the power. Like, Flash Cannon would have helped in that scenario, but I don't know if it actually probably does have the power at +2. So in that situation, Flash Cannon also would have been fine, but it doesn't have the immediacy of dealing with Latias that that Draco Meteor does. So I like Draco Meteor's coverage a lot. You could try, Psychic Flash Cannon, HP Fire, but the neutral coverage of Draco against things like Waters is just too good, I think. And just the sheer power of it, because Superachi sometimes lacking in, instant power. So this is a much simpler set. It's just, an offensive Jirachi. Like you can replace T-Wave with Body Slam. It's the same thing. But it's got Lumberry, which makes it, the same, like dueling with other status-heavy Jirachis. And switching into Breloom Spore, same idea. This is meant for use on more fast-paced offense teams. Like, end the game quick kinds of offense. And the cool thing is, and my buddy Jirachi did also use a set like this, I think he had leftovers, but it's you can run lefties on this. It's not like going to make a gigantic difference. Is Healing Wish in the last slot, and I think Healing Wish is really underrated in DPP. It does a lot of good, and it gives you a lot of flexibility for boosting up a sweeper like DD Gyarados is the main one. Gyarados is really, really dangerous. And there's some other options, like DD Tyranitar, for example, or another one which we might cover later. In a similar vein, here's standard Specs Latias, but with Healing Wish in the last slot. I mean, Healing Wish is kind of a given on Scarf, but I think it's really good on Specs as well, just because it gives you so much flexibility. Like the last slot on Specs Latias, I mean, sometimes people don't run Trick, they like Sleep Talk. I don't like Sleep Talk at all. I think it's really bad. It's so exploitable. And so I like Trick, and then you generally Dragon Pulse in the last slot. Totally fine, but I like Healing Wish, just because it gives you, again, flexibility, options, the ability to adapt your game plan, depending on what you're facing is really good to have. So I like Healing Wish for the same reasons, and I think I have a couple teams where I have both this Healing Wish Jirachi and Healing Wish Specs Latias. And then, other variants with Healing Wish Scarf Latias as well. So you have a lot of ways to, when a lot of teams' methods of dealing with setup sweepers is to outlast them, then you revive them and then make them deal with them over and over. Okay, here's Slow King. I think Slow King is cool. I think Slow Bro is really cool. August had a great Slow Bro team, and the basic idea is when offensive teams with Machamp are real pains, then you just throw Slow Bro at them, because own tempo means you can't be confused, and the fact that you're slower than Machamp means that it's payback. Well, it can hit you on the switch with payback for double damage, but then the lower, it's going to hit you first with payback, so it's weaker after that, so you can take that. Slowbro is also a water type that doesn't have great special defense, so it's not really phenomenal at handling something like Heatran. So sometimes you like putting Spadef on it, or you can run physically defensive Slowking, which I know August has also enjoyed in the past. I like physically defensive Slowking. I mean, the thing is with their stats, I believe it is more efficient technically to run Spadef Slowbro than to run physically defensive Slowking, unless you are doing something Slowking does that Slowbro cannot. So I guess like while I'm advertising Slowking here, then I'm also advertising Slowbro just because it's great. But one of the things that Slowking does that Slowbro doesn't is Nasty Plot, which is a lot more instantly threatening than Calm Mind. And that's the difference. I mean, you can run Calm Mind Slowbro if you want, but I think Nasty Plot Slowking is generally more efficient at that. And the idea is, well, Slowbro is really good against offense. It's amazing, in fact, but it's not so good against defensive stuff. Now, you are not going to get the same level of ruthless efficiency into offense of something like a physically defensive T-Wave Slowbro. If you're running Nasty Plot Slowking, you're kind of getting a hybrid. Like, you're helping yourself out against Machamp, fantastically, and you're still good against offense. But you have this while also being able to threaten defense. Now, it helps if you can paralyze an opposing Clefable first, so you don't get ruined by Encore. But if you can do that, then this thing is a terror. And it's not hard to paralyze Clefable either. Things like Jirachi and Latias and your own Clef, easiest thing in the world. So, or a Magnezone or something. So you do that, and Nasty Plot Slowking is going to really, really terrorize them. You can run Ice Beam over Psychic if you want to deal with defensive Latias. That's totally fine as well. Psychic is generally better because, you hit Machamp harder, and you really dissuade Breloom from switching in. And it's also much better against Gyarados. That's a big thing. So I think Psychic is better, especially because you can just, lure in and deal with Latias another way. Knock it off, or like... actually, the knockoff options for luring in Latias aren't that great, unless... I don't think Infernape gets knockoff in this gen. I don't remember. That would be really ambitious, an Infernape Slowking team. But more likely that you just, burn it with Heatran or something. That's much easier. And again, if it is an Ice Beam T-Wave Reflect Latias, it's the same with Super Rachi, except this Slowking is much better in the way of survivability. It's not actually going to threaten you, so you just Nasty Plot to +6. So, yeah, this is an underrated poke. Here's Bulk Up Machamp. So I'm a big fan of Machamp on fast-paced offense teams, but sometimes you struggle into defense. And the last move on Machamp, like you go, I'll just chuck on Bullet Punch, maybe Stone Edge for Zapdos. I've seen some people run Toxic on it for things like Hippo and Bulky Zapdos, which is a cool idea, but that's generally more for lefties. Not to say you can't run lefties on this, of course you can. But I like Lum because it lets you really just destroy Will-O-Wisp Rotom. Now, there are other ways to deal with Will-O-Wisp Rotom, like a Pursuiting Lum T-Tar, which is also a great Pokemon you might have on your team. So again, I have to stress preference. So this could be lefties easily, and that would even be preferred sometimes for dealing with sand. But if you have Healing Wish, like I tended to have with this thing, then you don't need to... then as long as you're smart, then you don't need that longevity at all costs. So you get the benefit. And see, this is, again, I have to stress how team-dependent these choices are. So I'm really giving you the general idea. So if you have that sustain of Healing Wish, or double Healing Wish if you're ambitious, then you get the benefits of that status shrugging, and while still being able to, have something in the way of longevity. Of course, the longevity of leftovers is incredible, so I really did want it if possible. So again, it depends. Just make sure you have to, because a lot of these Machamp teams really don't like Will-O-Wisp Rotom, so that's why Lum is the preferred item in general. But if you can deal with it, then, by all means. Anyway, Bulk Up is really good because when you start facing things like physically defensive Hippo, physically defensive Skarmory, bulky Zapdos, then you really, or even like a defensive Latias with Reflect, depending on the circumstances, you really risk getting stalled out because you're just hitting them with the power you already have. Not to say Machamp isn't already naturally strong, but when you bulk up and suddenly you're doing over half to Skarmory, you're 2 KOing it, and you make yourself less vulnerable to revenge killing, by the way, with the +1 defense boost helping you shrug off Scarf T-Tar superpower in particular. So it is a really, really, I think it's the best option on these kinds of Machamps, by far. Forget Substitute. I think Substitute, while definitely nasty, well, that one definitely needs lefties. But I think, it's fine, but it's, I think Substitute is generally overkill. It's like you already... If you're going to be messing the opponent up with Machamp, then you're probably going to be doing it with or without a sub. Now, if you're going for the full-on paralysis abuse route, and you just want to hide behind the sub and get more opportunities that way, sure, I get it. But I think it's generally more prudent. You cover more things if you bulk up, because suddenly this is... a sweeper, or sorry, not a sweeper, but just more of a wall breaker in a way that you control better than just hoping they hit themselves in confusion. So this makes it a lot more forceful, a lot more difficult to deal with. You even do things like, Gliscor has a tougher time revenge killing you because of the defense boost. So yeah, bulk up on Machamp is really, really good at ripping through defensive stuff. Yeah, and in a lot of games against offensive teams, then that fourth move slot rarely comes into play anyway. So yeah, bulk up on Machamp, the best. Counter T-Tar in the lead. I like Rock Sash T-Tar in general as a lead because to set the stage for things like Machamp in particular, which I had a team with this T-Tar alongside such a Machamp, then you want rocks and sand as soon as possible, because that way you are digging into a lot of... Like, Gyarados is a much worse answer to Machamp with rocks up, and with rocks and sand, it's just nightmarish. So you want those as soon as possible, and if you can get them, by T-Tar rocking turn 1, then that's wonderful. Then, of course, you can also do things like Taunt to stop rocks from slower leads. And then the last slot can kind of be up for grabs. You can low kick to deal with things like Heatran and other T-Tars. But I like counter, one, because it turns the tables on Metagross, which is really helpful. It's not guaranteed because sometimes Metagross can run rocks in the lead slot, but I think lead Metagross is much more well-suited to running, what you call it? Sorry, 4 attacks, not rocks in the lead slot. Because if you run Rocks Metagross, one, you miss out on one of Bullet Punch, EQ, or Boom, and you don't want to miss out on any of those. And you also have those dumb scenarios where it's like, well, I could take out the opponent, but then I'm not going to get Rocks because I'm going to take heavy damage doing so, and you don't want to give up on it. So if you're running double Rocks, which is great, then that's fine, but most of the time you're not going to, so I think 4 attacks Metagross is generally more reliable. So this does make it a consistent choice into that. It's the Empoleon problem of, wanting to rock versus wanting to kill the opponent. But, if you kill the opponent, then you're not going to get rocks, and that's bad. So it's generally better to put rocks on something else. So yeah, counter's good against that. And even if it's a Sash Metagross, then you bring it to 1 HP, so it's much better than what you would do, with anything else. And you're also faster than Adamant Sash Gross, because it's Jolly Tar, so you force a Bullet Punch, you can switch out of it. Now, obviously, then, Mind Games come into play, but you give yourself the tools as opposed to being completely destroyed by it. And that's only if you want to counter the lead Metagross. And if you have a good follow-up to lead Gross, like a Sub-Rotom or something, then you can just Rocks on it. And since it's Sash Tar, then you'll still have it as a sacrifice. So you got your Rocks and Sand, and, there you go. You can also run a second Rocker with this T-Tar, though. I think that's very efficient. Because if you're using counter early on, then odds are you might have that same problem that I just outlined with Metagross. So it's very easy to slap Rocks on Jirachi as well. And I think Double Rocks is very efficient in general, not just for early game flexibility reasons, but for keeping pressure on teams that rely on something like Fortress or Starmie or even Donphan to spin. That's really helpful because they're like, all right, I cleared Rocks, I'm good, and then you pull out the other Rocker, and so I think it's very easy to fit this kind of stuff into such movesets. Anyway, Metagross is one option, but the real reason I love this set is for exactly what you're about to see. Now, this works against lead Hippowdon as well, because they're going to Rock, so you taunt and then counter. And they've got slow Pokemon, so you are going to be able to get Rocks later against, like, Skarmory or something. But this also works against the common Rotom leads, because common Rotom leads are Rest Talk, and you... So taunt to prevent them from burning you, because they're going to think you're Scarf most of the time. It's like, oh, well, if he's going to Scarf Rocks or Crunch, I'll burn it and permanently ruin T-Tar. So taunt, and then Hippo comes in and gets taunted, and it's like, oh, well, this is going to Rock, so I may as well just EQ it, bring it down, and then this happens instead. And it's a thing of beauty. So, yeah. So this is a great lead for offensive teams. HP Grass T-Tar. This is a set I have liked. The EVs here, they are specific to a team, I think. So I wouldn't really sweat the specifics there. You can obviously change them to your liking. It can be plus attack, nature, whatever you want. And the item, I think originally I had this on a Chople Tar for Gengar, the Ultimate Pain, and also Breloom, of course. The Mach Punch. But it can really be whatever you want. It can be Expert Bell. It can be Pasho Bear. It can be Custap. T-Tar can do it all. It can be lefties. I just liked Lum on this team for some reason I don't remember right now. So I've liked this set ever since 2015, in fact. I made it on a team I built for CVB because he was beef battling to Sung. I'm going to make a video on this beef battle. This is the last beef battle I remember, actually. Or beef best of 3. It was Smoke and Tortiers. And... yeah, it was just, so what you'll see on the team that CBB is using that I built is that it really does not like Heatran, I was looking at Heatran. It really does not like, oh, I forgot that Tran was Chople. It really does not like Swampert. A lot of offensive teams, they have this issue where they will be really good against most defensive Pokemon, but they threaten to just get completely blanked by Swampert. And, yeah, you don't get to see the HP Grass here because it defense drops lefties less pert, so he actually gets scared out. So, yeah, but the basic idea is if you just imagine that the Swampert is lefties, then it is going to be a major pain for offensive teams like this to switch into and threaten. Because, that's why Swampert is so good into offense with its traditional sets. It just, it's scary. In that it takes your hits and it also threatens you with just EQ and Ice Beam. So it is really good to be able to, on certain teams obviously. Sometimes you're going to want to pursue, but you'll also want to have the immediate danger of HP Grass. And I had this pop up recently. So like in this scenario, it's even more apparent how much of a pain Swampert is. Because see, here, this Swampert has been tricked in Iron Ball. So a Draco Meteor, and then it gets tricked, but it's still going to be a pain at 100% for my offensive team to switch into. And so when I get this opportunity with T-Tar here, then the Swampert's coming in, and even without the Iron Ball, what's my other option? What are my other options going to be? Not every team can afford to pressure Swampert with a Choice Band T-Tar. They need the flexibility of having that switch, the ability to switch moves and to Fire Blast, or to Superpower against a Heatran, so they're not locked into it. So here you just HP Grass, and the problem is no more. So yeah, HP Grass T-Tar is really legit. Obviously, you prefer to have Ice Beam against Hippo, but hey, it doesn't hurt against physically defensive variants. And most importantly, Quagsire, and sometimes even Gastrodon, but mostly Quagsire is really popular because people realize just how efficient it is at stuffing a lot of offense. And I mean, you think dealing with Swampert is bad. Try dealing with, a Quagsire that can recover and is immune to water. That's going to shut down a lot of offensive stuff. So yeah, HP Grass, Tyranitar, really good. Empoleon. I love Empoleon. I use it a lot. All its sets are just wonderful. But I particularly like the defensive sets because they're so rock solid into Jirachi. But unlike something like Heatran with lefties, which does the same thing, this is also really threatening to defense because of knockoff. It effectively makes it unwallable. Now, most of these defensive Empoleon sets, and again, there's a variety. You can run Surf, Knockoff, Protect, Roar, Stealth Rock, whatever you want. Yawn, probably. But there's a lot of variety, but they're generally running bulkier sets, with special defense to take things like Latias. I personally like the fact that that Empoleon takes hits well, from Latias, Kingdra, things like that, generally just with max HP, and it's, natural bulk. So I really like the idea of just running max special attack on it, because this makes it more of a threat. First of all, you're more of a threat against offense because you make it more difficult to switch into your moves. They can't switch around it because you think, oh, it's offense, they don't mind knockoff as much, and they like the fact that it's a weak defensive Pokemon. First of all, even zero investment in Empoleon is not weak, but even with But with special attack investment, then you put a lot more pressure on them, is what I'm getting at. And against defense, you become even more of a pain, especially because with special attack investment, you can better justify running Ice Beam, so Breloom doesn't wall you anymore. You put huge pressure on Latias, Celebi can't, sit on you for a while. I mean, not that you can't outlast those other Pokemon, of course, but I really like special attack, max special attack Latias. Is this the one? Yeah. So see here, you switches into Jirachi like anything else, and it takes the HP ground, or fighting, I guess. No, it's ground. Anyway, but look how much it does to the Jirachi in return. That is a significant amount. And now even better, look how much it's doing to this resisted Breloom. That is a significant chunk. Because Breloom is normally, if it's a zero special attack Empoleon, that Surf is going to bounce off. But this Surf already, well, you see what I'm getting at. So then we skip to later in the game. I think it comes back again. And the fact is that this Ice Beam on this thing means that when it comes in, then Latias, if it's just a Surf, Knockoff, Protect, whatever set, then Latias can come in even at low health. And, I mean, full Paris here, but ignore that. Because, see, most of the time, okay, Latias is free, I'm going to Healing Wish, I'm going to do whatever. And if it just gets knocked down with Ice Beam. So see here, even against a fast-paced offensive team, the special attack investment in Ice Beam makes Empoleon a threat. So I love this Empoleon set. It's really good. This one, the Scarf Empoleon, okay, I admit this one's a little goofier. But in the same vein of being good against offense, sometimes you really like that immediate speed. And being able to threaten things like... The flip side of this is running resistance berries, which is more reliable. But sometimes you can't run all of Shuka and Chople and Wacken. So you like outrunning these Pokemon, like these Flygons and these Gengars, and these Lucarios, before they can hit you. And of course, you are able to outrun them, so you can beat them even if you're lower on health. Because, if you're at 30%, then you're not going to survive a Lucario close combat with Choppleberry. So yeah, I really like this set as well. It lets you make interesting use of Empoleon's Resist, and it's one of my favorite traits about it. I like Scarfers that are useful against defense, and with Knockoff, you can you can really mess with a defensive Clefable, or a defensive Latias rather. Clefable or defensive. You can run a defensive Latias, or you can ruin a Clefable switching in. So yeah, or a bulky Empoleon. Yeah. So. Here's a pretty simple one. I like HP Electric Swampert. I was gonna get the game where, what was it that I wanted to show in that one? I'll find it later or something. Yeah. Oh, I remember now. So I don't have the replay of the next one open, but it's fine. So you actually no, I'll pull it up after. So yeah, with the Swampert, then you are pretty much a standard wall-breaking Swampert. You know, you Hydro Ice Beam your way through a lot of things, and you threaten Clef with EQ. Obviously, it's helped out with something like Pursuit Tar support, or of course, you know, Boom Heatran, or both. You know, this Swampert fits beautifully onto offensive teams like that. And you have the benefit of HP Electric for dealing with Gyarados, which is otherwise one of the weaker spots for Swampert. You know, Gyara can take advantage of it pretty nastily. But with HP Electric, not a problem. Simple. And you're not really giving up on much. I mean, it's nice to have Focus Punch or Superpower or Stealth Rock in that slot for sure. Again, team dependent. You know, you want to... I wouldn't necessarily use this Swampert as a Gyarados check because it doesn't have the bulk. But you definitely... I mean, in a worst case, you can do a lot worse than using HP Electric Swampert to help finish off Gyara. But it's more about taking advantage of Gyarados switching into you, which it happens quite a bit. Because, again, Swampert is really good into offense, and the options of switching into it aren't that great, and Gyarados is one of the better ones. So if you ruin that, then it's just gravy. Yeah, so the replay I wanted to show... Let me... Yeah, who is it that I was playing? Oh, yeah. I'm gonna pull this up just because Life Orb Rotom, this is not an original set at all, but it's a forgotten one, and it's really threatening. Because Rotom is often, you know, Scarf or Rest Talk, pretty much. Sometimes you get funky with subsets, but those are its, you know, go-tos, right? And I like Specs as well, but I really love the flexibility of Life Orb. One, because it has the longevity of Pain Split. I mean, you can take this as me advertising Specs Rotom as well. I think it's really good because Trick ruins defense, and you don't want to absorb it with a lot of common choice Pokemon because it can threaten to blow them up so well. But the flexibility of Life Orb is really wonderful, and I'll show you a great example if I can. Yeah. Yes, it's this one. So, so stuff is happening. That's not really the point of this one. And yeah, okay, so Rotom comes in on Starmie, recovering, and now most Scarf Rotom. So see, look, this, I know this is not a Scarf T-Tar, I know it's banded, so I can Shadow Ball freely, hit the Starmie, hit the Latias, which can come into T-Ball or Hydro, no matter what, because Shadow Ball is not used that much on even Scarf Rotoms. Or it's not a spammable move. You don't want to spam Choice Shadow Ball, and this goes for Specs too, when there's a T-Tar around. But here... Or even, you know, if there's like a 10% Clefable around, you lock into Shadow Ball, congrats on the free Softwell. But with this, the flexibility of this Rotom set, then I can Shadow Ball into that Clef, and then I'll just finish it off with T-Ball after. So here, Latias is going to be a good check to it, but it gets smacked by Life Orb Shadow Ball, and the power of Life Orb really helps Shadow Ball plow through Latias, which otherwise takes it surprisingly well. And now Tyranitar comes in and gets Life Orb Hydroed, and, you know, this is a really bulky CB-Tar, which is why it does just under half. But even doing just under half to T-Tar is really big for Rotom, which otherwise, you know, barely scratches it. So that kind of flexibility is really, really excellent in being able to do it. And I mean, if this T-Tar is a little more chip and it just gets dropped, but in this case, Rotom does the job of weakening it for my Scarf Heatran, which now threatens the opposing team a lot better. So yeah, really cool. I love that set. This set is really cool. You got to watch out for Encore Clef, so it takes some maneuvering. But and I really like it with weather change. So like a sunny day Heatran or Rain Dance Latias or, you know, Suicune or something. But if you don't have it, it becomes a lot harder to maneuver. But the cool thing about Spite is, and you want Shadow Ball, because if you got a sub Rotom without Shadow Ball, you're suddenly walled by Rest Talk Rotom, and you don't want that. So Spite is really good because it lowers the PP of the last move, target's last move by 4. So Clefable soft boils on you, that's 1, and then you Spite it, and suddenly it's lost 5. And in the battle of dealing with the eternally unkillable Clef, then this can go a long way. pretty simple. It can also do things like mess with Wish Jirachi. So yeah, it's very cool in that regard. It's Sub-Roto has a lot of options. I think Spite in general is underexplored. Gengar, Wide Lens. This is an easy one. It's just a standard Gengar. And with Wide Lens, you could give greater justification for Hypnosis over Taunt, because if Gengar sleeps something, that's game-breaking. But even without, then Gengar is so good, but Focus Blast is so bad. And, so many games, it's like, well, I win if Focus Blast hits, but, 70% is just terrible. And getting that up to 77 is much better. I mean, that's better than a standard Will-O-Wisp. So, absolutely go for it. Suddenly you're clicking Focus Blast, with greater confidence as opposed to dread. So it's because so many games, the opponent just gives up against Gengar. It's like, well, hope Focus Blast misses. And when that's not an option for them, then that's great. And of course, having a more accurate Will-O-Wisp is wonderful as well. And I like Taunt just to prevent silly things like Clefable healing on you. But hey, you could definitely run Hypnosis and really mess up their day. So I would do that. I also like Sludge Bomb on Gengar. Well, a couple other things. I like Knock Off and I like Sludge Bomb. I like Knock Off to force remove lefties from Clef so they can't do things like Protect on you and gain health, things like that. And it's also a good mid-ground move because it removes Scarves. If they're trying to pivot into you with a Scarfer, you don't have to Focus Blast constantly. You can knock off. I mean, it's a harder move to use because Gengar's so frail, but hey, worth the effort. And but Sludge Bomb is nice because it gives you another move to hit Clefable. Like, the coverage, bad, but it lets you hit Clefable without relying on Focus Blast while still having Stab. Because the thing with Clefable, it's not really a great Gengar answer, but it kind of is. Because the only way Gengar can actually damage it at all is with Focus Blast. And, put aside the accuracy for a second, remember that as APP. So with Sludge Bomb, you have more flexibility in that regard. Yeah, so I would also consider Sludge Bomb for that position. I don't think it has anything else you would want to... It's definitely the best other option. You don't want to HP Fighting. I mean, it's so bad. And Life Orb Sludge Bomb, I mean, look, the coverage, not good. But the power, it's actually stronger than Shadow Ball. Neutral Sludge Bomb is, Gengar's strongest move, so worth it. You could also consider something like Thunderbolt for that. But at that point, I would start thinking about Taunt alongside these coverage moves to make sure, instead of Will-O-Wisp, to make sure that Clef doesn't, doesn't soft boil them off as easily, because the goal is to beat it down repeatedly. Yeah. You could also do something like Wise Glasses as the item to give things like Sludge Bomb and T-Bolt greater kick, but yeah. I'm going to take one of my bathroom breaks, and I will be right back. Nothing like the feeling of knowing you're well hydrated. Anyway, this is Specs Kingdra, standard, but very underappreciated. And look, like, Specs Kingdra was growing in popularity before Latias was unbanned. And that was kind of Specs Kindra's thing, right? After Latias gets banned, it's like, well, how can I recreate Specs Latias? Oh, well, Specs Kindra's actually kind of like that. Not the same typing at all, but its Specs Draco Meteor, its modest Specs Draco Meteor is almost as strong as timid Specs Latias. So, and of course, Kingdra has its own advantages. But then Latias came back and it was kind of forgotten. And if you wanted some other Specs water types, I mean, the tier was not hurting for them. Specs Swampert even was kind of popular for a while. But Specs Starmie, really good. I'm a big fan of Specs Starmie. And Specs Empoleon has even gotten some use. I think Specs Empoleon is excellent. So, and of course Specs Latias, all over the place. But like Specs Kingdra, very, very underappreciated. And I think it's really. I'm trying to stop myself from vomiting out 50 different things at the same time. Okay, so Specs Kingdra is great. Number 1, threatening to defense. Number 2, threatening to offense. That's, what you want in a Pokemon, right? You don't want a Specs Pokemon that's like, oh, well, it destroys defense, but against offense it kind of falters. It's got that fantastic typing with only one weakness, and it's got bulk. So you can help check Dragon Dancers with it, and you hit hard enough in return. Post Latias, Specs Kingdra hasn't gone like extinct or anything, but people relegate it to only use on rain teams, and rain teams are gimmicky and not good. So it's much, much better. I mean, look, I'm not saying that you can't use a cool set like Rain Dance Rotom, which is a great set, by the way. I'm not saying you can't use Rain Dance Rotom alongside Kingdra. Matter of fact, that would probably be great. But I'm saying you don't need a full-on Rain team to use Specs Kingdra. It's got the powerful Specs Hydro Pump that destroys everything, but it's also got Stab Draco Meteor. Latias' Stab Draco Meteor doesn't have Stab Water, and these two moves are only resisted by Empoleon. Well, and Shedinja, but another reason why Empoleon is fantastic, by the way. But yes, having it, Specs Starmie, great, but it's really only threatening things with Specs Hydro or Surf. And same for those other Specs Water types. Kingdra, it has the scariest stab move in the game in Stab Draco Meteor, and it's got another one of the scariest stab moves in the game with Hydro. So you are threatening everything. It's got the power, it's got the bulk, it's got a strong speed tier, putting it ahead of a lot of that mid-range stuff. So yeah, Specs Kingdra is really good, and it's got the power to back it up too. In this game, then. Actually, this game has a lot of underrated stuff. But yeah, just Kingdra here. I mean, this is sort of like a team I had where I had Starmie in its place. But I enjoyed a Kingdra here more because of its greater bulk, which gives me a lot more, yeah, like, for example, like the Breloom thing. That Breloom 2KO was a thing of beauty for sure. But, oh, his nickname is, yeah. But the thing is here, like, if this Metagross was Agility, actually it might have been, for all I know, but if this Metagross is Agility, it's a lot more threatening if I have Starmie as opposed to if I have Kingdra. Kingdra takes Metagross's hits a lot better. So, we're actually going to come back to this game because this game has a lot of cool stuff. But, yeah. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Specs Kingdra. Use it. Outrage on CB Gara. CB Gara generally likes to run Payback to hit things like Starmie, Rotom, Latias. It's a big one. Sometimes people have started running Stone Edge to help it check other DD Gara, which is nice. But I'm a big fan of Outrage, and this is for the same principle as like Draco Meteor Jirachi, because Gyarados, great with Stab, has great super effective coverage. Sometimes it just needs raw power in a neutral context, and that's what Outrage does. First of all, Outrage absolutely melts Latias. Like, even the bulkiest Latias, which can take, a +1 Ice Fang, yeah, Outrage is dropping it. But what I really like about it is that Outrage is effectively as strong as Waterfall, because Waterfall is 80, so with Stab 120. You have that with other coverage. Matter of fact, it's funny, this is coming right after Kingdra, because Water Dragon goes so well together. With this neutral power, then a lot of, because let's say you want to hit a Starmie or a Latias switch, and you want to EQ, you want to Ice Fang, you want to Payback. Those moves are doing a lot, like Ice Fanging into T-Tar, that's bad, or Paybacking, even worse. And you have these sorts of like coverage conundrums. You don't want to EQ or Payback into Breloom either. And with Outrage, you're slamming all of these. T-Tar doesn't want to switch into Outrage. Breloom gets melted, and obviously you have your, Waters get, crushed. You have your great coverage against, other Gera like you want, and you have the super effective smack on Latias still. So, yeah, I am a big fan of Outrage on CB Gera, because Outrage has seen some use on DD Gera, specifically for this kind of thing, for the bigger smack on Latias. But I like it on CB as well for that immediacy, that middle ground. I have to make a video about middle ground. But you need that middle ground, and you need the power to do it, especially on a choiced Pokemon. This is even more essential than on the Jirachi thing. Well, I don't know about essential, but game-breaking, because you are choiced. Jirachi can at least switch its moves, but if you're choiced, then you really need to have that strong power option. So then you have things like this, where Gyarados comes in and just outrages, because I don't know what's coming in here. There's a lot of things. I think there should be a Latias or a Starmie or something, but it's facing off against Breloom. Do I want to Waterfall it and risk doing nothing? Do I want to Ice Fang and potentially just get... No, you outrage because it slams everything at least decently. So, Steels don't want to come in most of the time, and even if you do, then it's much better to hit him with Outrage than with Ice Fang, especially if you're at low health like this. So, yeah. Metagross wasn't wanting to switch into the threat of a Gyarados there nearly as much as a Starmie, so Outrage, really good. Yeah, and another underrated, this one is also, very standard, of course, but just Life Orb on DD Gera, really good. You push a lot of things are geared to take hits from +1 Gera, like bulky Jirachi, Breloom, Latias, but you throw a Life Orb in there, or feasibly like Expert Belt, but I like Life Orb because it also powers up Waterfall against neutral things, mainly Skarmory. I've also thought about like Mystic Water, but yeah, Life Orb is good, and you plow through like Clefable as well. So yeah, Life Orb Gera makes a big difference. Spadef Metagross, this is a standard cool lefties Metagross, which, even if it's Adamant Max Attack or Impish Max Defense or whatever, it's always going to be good because it helps shrug off Jirachi, and it helps take on D-Deers and, physical stuff of all kinds, Breloom, whatever. But with special defense, then you devour Latias, and you don't fear Magazone nearly as much. You can take on Gengar much more effectively. Especially if you start running Zen. I think Zen Headbutt is also underrated on Metagross for coverage against Rotom, Zapdos, Gyarados. And, even if you get burned against Gengar, then you still smack it. A super effective smack on Breloom can be nice as well, Machamp. But most of the time you're not fitting that. Most of the time you want rocks. Sometimes you can run Pursuit, actually, if you really want to make the most out of that Latias devouring ability, and you don't need to KO it like with T-Tar. You just chunk it really hard. And, so Pursuit, and it also helps against Gengar as well if it's going to run away from you. So, yeah, Pursuit is good on Spadef Metagross. And, my favorite application of Spadef Metagross is here, double in, expecting a Jirachi or a T-Tar or something. Oh, no, it's a Heatran. But I have the flexibility to stay in, survive just cleanly, and EQ. So, yeah, Spadef Metagross, great. Another standard set, Spec Zapdos, forgotten, underappreciated. Zapdos is like Kingdra in that when Latias came back, people were like, oh, come on, this thing isn't so good anymore. And then, Sub Roost showed people, hey, this thing is actually an absolute nightmare. Oh, I just realized one of the sets I forgot to include. Okay, I have the replay for it, though, so it's fine. But Spec Zapdos is very underappreciated, especially with HP Grass, ruin Swampert, smack Hippo really hard, unexpectedly. And just generally be a pain. Offensive Zapdos in general, such a pain because you think you can, just eat it up with Clef and Latias, and then it U-turns out of those into T-Tar, and things get really nasty really fast. So, yeah, if not Specs, then some sort of offensive Zapdos. Same, just as good as it was without Latias in the picture. Maybe not as automatic, but it's like with Infernape. It's like, oh, well, it would be good, but Latias, it's like, yeah, well, there are a lot of ways to get rid of Latias, so get rid of the Latias, and then this thing should go crazy, right? Yeah, standard lefties Heatran. So the idea behind this Heatran is that you have your offensive team, and you want to have a Heatran, and you want it to eat up Jirachi repeatedly, hence the leftovers. but you're also going to be paralyzed when you switch into that Jirachi. So speed EVs are useless. So you have a max HP Heatran, and most of the time when you have max HP Heatran, then you think SpDef, right? Let's eat up all these special hits easily. Sure, but you can also just run max special attack. So you have a bulky Heatran with lots of longevity, then you still have Lava Plume to burn T-Tars and Swamperts and Latiases, but you're hitting hard as well. And that can be really unexpected. For example, I had a game where I had this, offensive defensive Heatran, and you see lefties, you think, okay, Lava Plume, not going to do much. I can switch Clefable in easily. I think the Clefable switch in, it took like 38, I think. So it's doing a lot of damage. That lets you force things more in all sorts of situations. So yeah, and much more than a SpDef Heatran would. Obviously, you can run Modest if you don't want to be this slow, but I like the extra power on Explosion. So, Gastron is really good. Sticky Hole helps you deal with knockoff from Clef, lets you pivot into Trick. If you're going to be trying to absorb Trick from Latias, then you might want more SpDef. So again, team dependent. But I like Physical Defense because it lets it shrug off things like the DDers mainly. That's really good. It's Quagsire-esque in that regard. And so Gastro in general is good, and I like Yawn on it. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with it, but with Yawn, then you are able to force switches. I mean, if you get the sleep off, that's even better. But generally, the idea is with spikes, you force switches, and yeah, very simple. I like it very much. Yeah, cool. There's a lot of Flygon sets that could be included here. I like this set specifically because I like mixed Flygon, but I don't care for sometimes how its Earthquakes feel so weak. I mean, yeah, you got the Life Orb, but it's uninvested. So with this set, then you aim to have invested, and it could be Naughty Nature if you want. I think that's fine as well. In fact, I would prefer that for most cases. But yeah, sometimes you have those EQs, and they're just not strong enough into like a Tyranitar or Jirachi, and it's just depressing. And with this, then you give that extra boost to the Earthquakes, or like the fact that standard mixed Flygon is countered by Clefable, for example, because it can take Draco Meteor and uninvested Life Orb EQ. So one way around that is to run standard mixed Flygon, but with Outrage over Roost. But if you want to have Roost still, then you can run this, and you have also you have a much more spammable Dragon Stab that doesn't get pivoted around. You can't have something absorb it and go to -2, and suddenly you can't throw around that dragon stuff anymore. So it goes very well together. And even uninvested Life Orb Fire Blast is going to be enough to really put the fear in physically defensive Scarm and bulky Breelooms and things like that. So yeah, I think this is a very good Flygon set. You have to have something to deal with Gliscor. But then again, Gliscor can... If you're trying to break through Gliscor Clef stuff with Flygon, then you got to do it with Outrage if you're going to be running the Draco Meteor variant. So, yeah. There's all sorts of Flygon sets. There's cool subsets it can run that I haven't figured out fully, but, it's got a lot of great stuff in its toolkit. I really like this set with Lefties or Soft Sand, U-Turn, Dragonclaw, EQ, Toxic, alongside Magnezone. And I think Choice Band is also terrific. Speaking of physical power, you pair that with Mag, or you put Fire Punch on it, and it's just it's so fast against other offensive Pokemon. So again, good against offense and defense. Really scary against pretty much everything. So CB Gone, very underrated. Hope we see it more. And finally, Roost on Scarf Flygon. This is something I also ran in 2015, I think. Yeah, because I was running Empoleon as my water, so I didn't have a really good switch to Heatran Fire Blast, so I was using Flygon for it. And so Flygon's going to force that switch against Heatran anyway, so you Roost on the switch. And nowadays, it has a better context in the sense of it being a good knockoff absorber against Clefable. So you can play a longer game against defense. And I think we've seen some other players use that as well. I think it's really good. So yeah, lots of stuff with Flygon. Speaking of absorbing knockoffs, here is something I saw Jirachi use. I think it's excellent. You have Scarf Luke, and with Copycat being nerfed, then... Oh, this should be Adamant. Why is this Jolly? Jolly sucks. Jolly is fine, obviously. But, yeah, the idea is if you switch into a knockoff, then you can just SD against defensive teams. And against offensive teams, then you really, most of the time, you only need Close Combat, Ice Punch, T-Punch. Obviously, you can fit in things like Crunch or Blaze Kick if you're trying to deal with bulky SD Scissor, which I think is pretty cool. Got some nice, interesting coverage to it, too. Stone Edge. Toxic is actually nice for dealing with, like, Hippo, trying to switch in. Yeah. Finally, this is your standard offensive Skarmory lead. Some players like Rock Tomb on it, but Icy Wind is better because Rock Tomb is, Rock Tomb is physical, but you're not doing damage with it. And Icy Wind has 95 accuracy, so Rock Tomb is 80, which is pitiful. So yeah, this lets you use lead Skarmory reliably into things like Azelf and Arrow and still get your hazards. It's wonderful. So what was the thing I was missing? Oh, yeah. So Aerodactyl offense is really popular because Azelf offense is really popular, and Aerodactyl gets the jump on Azelf. You know, Aerodactyl is like the #1 thing you hate facing with Azelf, but you can completely turn the tables on. Look at Subzap just being annoying. You can completely turn the tables on lead Arrow with your Azelf lead if you run. I'm just waiting for it to actually happen. If you run, you probably know where this is coming. Or going. Trick Scarf. That was fast, so you didn't see the Scarf message. But yeah, Trick Scarf, good against... You completely ruin Arrow. It's wonderful. And turn the tables completely. And it's also just a standard Azelf, so it's great. Yeah, and it's good against defense, obviously. A lot of defensive teams don't have Trick Absorbers, and you're just going to completely ruin something like a Jirachi. So, yeah, Trick Scarf Azelf, good. I like Scarf Azelf in general. I like as a late-game Pokemon. I think it's interesting. Choice Band Azelf is always a forgotten threat. I think it's about time we start seeing that. I think mid-game offensive Azelf has a lot of potential, too. That speed tier is just so wonderful. So, yeah, that is basically that. So, thank you. So, I think that was everything. Yeah, it was. I think that's all I wanted to cover. So, thank you so much for... Oh, wow, it's over an hour. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was useful to you in some way. So, yeah. God, I love DPP. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.